Syria will join the treaty banning the use of chemical weapons next month. Of course, this follows a diplomatic breakthrough on Syria's chemical weapons that might avert U.S. military action against the Assad regime. Secretary of State John Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov announcing an agreement to secure and destroy Syria's chemical weapons stockpile by the middle of next year. But first, the Syrian President Assad has to account for his arsenal. And as we've reported this half hour, he has a week to do that. If he doesn't comply, the U.S. and Russia will seek to enforce it through the United Nations. Is that workable? John Bolton is a former U.S. ambassador to the UN, a Fox News contributor, and senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Ambassador, good to see you today.
Glad to be with you.
So the big overarching question is, what happens if the Assad regime decides not to comply with today's terms or just simply refuses to give up the weapons?
Well, it won't do that. There will not be a big confrontation where Assad pounds his fist on the table and says, I will never comply. Instead, this agreement will die a death by 1,000 cuts. So let's begin at the beginning. Assad is required to make his initial declaration on Friday. It'll slip a few days, or maybe a few more. And maybe the first declaration won't be full and complete, and it'll have to be amended, and then it'll have to be amended again. You can see the impact of this as time goes on, and I think that's exactly what the strategy is.
So when our James Rosen a little while ago asked Secretary Kerry this, he said, well, we'll make them comply. And how does that work?
Well, note one of the fine ironies here is that we have agreed with Russia, which has been in violation itself of the Chemical Weapons Convention since the treaty came into force. I think most experts agree Russia did not make its own full and complete declaration of its chemical weapons stockpiles in the mid-1990s. And many believe, including information we've received from defectors, that Russia has been in violation of the treaty, developing new generations of chemical weapons. So the notion that Russia is going to vouch for Bashar al-Assad is almost comical. You can't make this stuff up. Moreover, the language that was quoted in James Rosen's report is important. It says the Security Council will take measures commensurate with the violations. Commensurate with the violations. Well, that word means anything you want it to mean, and you can bet that in a debate in the Security Council, it will go on for quite some time.
Well, one of the loudest proponents for taking decisive action against Syria over this chemical weapons use has been Senator Lindsey Graham. In his first reaction now, he talked with Governor Huckabee. Here's a little bit of that.
The mixed message and the debacle called Syria can't be repeated when it comes to Iran. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get a bipartisan coalition together. We're going to put together a use of force resolution allowing our country to use military force as a last resort to stop the Iranian nuclear program, to make sure they get a clear signal that all this debacle called Syria doesn't mean we're confused about Iran.
Ambassador, you were one of the first people to say we need to keep our eye on Iran. Syria is a secondary issue. What's your response to the senator?
Well, I think he's exactly right. I think that saying that we will give the president authority to use force is probably the last thing that Obama wants. But I think we should do it. I don't think once granted the authority he will ever strike Iran's nuclear weapons program. And what's worse, I think the Iranians believe that too.
Real quickly, you've written an op-ed this week, and in it you say that the president has said Syria has violated international norms, not international law, with its chemical weapons. Why is that important to note?
Well, this is the administration's point. They keep talking about international norms because they know that Syria never became a party to the Chemical Weapons Convention. Hence, this administration, which would love to base an act of war on a violation of international law, can't say that. This is dangerous for America. It's dangerous when you hear President Obama say, but 98% of the world has endorsed this treaty. The United States has rightly refused to enter into very harmful treaties, the Kyoto Protocol, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, the International Criminal Court, the Landmines Convention, that almost every other nation has subscribed to. So if the fact that a lot of nations endorse a treaty can be made into an international norm, that can be used against the United States. It defeats the treaty ratification provisions. of the Constitution. People should shy away from international norms, and I don't think it's anything the American people would endorse anyway. The American people will endorse the use of force consistent with American interests, not for the abstraction of international norms.
Very interesting. Real quickly before I let you go, the president seems to be now focused on getting international consensus over Syria. My question is why and why now? Because for a while there, France was the only person standing with us, our only country, and we were willing, it looked like at that point, to take military action.
I think the president is very grateful to President Putin. He got him out of an impossible dilemma. I don't think the president himself wants to use force. Now he will never have to. And he himself said the longer time goes by from the August 21 use of chemical weapons, the harder it will be to generate the emotion necessary to get support for the use of force. The idea that you couldn't get support in Congress to use force against Assad after those pictures means that nonetheless you'll be able to get congressional approval because Syria violated this agreement. It's a delusion. So is Syria policy generally.
You know, and all along, Syria continues in its march and its civil war, and people will die in other ways outside of the chemical weapons use. And that's part of what Senator McCain was saying, that, you know, if we don't fight to change the situation, what have we accomplished? Ambassador Bolton, good to see you today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.